I'm going to show you how to use McKinsey & Company's pyramid principle to structure a message in a thorough and persuasive way. And as a bonus near the end, I'm going to tell you about a related concept, McKinsey's MECE principle. That is, how to make sure your talking points are mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive. If you're keeping track, this is part 2 in a 4-part series on McKinsey & Company's communication frameworks that you can use to level up your communication skills in professional settings. Like all McKinsey frameworks, the pyramid principle is just as much of an analytical tool to clarify your thinking as it is a schema to structure a message. It's like the old expression goes, clear speaking shows clear thinking. I'm basing this video on my own personal experience working as an outside consultant to McKinsey and watching them use the pyramid principle in action. Barbara Minto wrote a book based upon her experience at McKinsey called The Pyramid Principle, and there's a great article on the Product Mindset website that I'm drawing from as well, and I'll put links to the book and the article in the description below this video. McKinsey's pyramid has 3 levels, the top level, second level, and the third level. Your top level message answers the question, what's your overall point? What's the main message you want your listeners to take away? What is it you want your message to accomplish? This is more than simply expressing a general idea. Your level 1 message should lean towards some action that you want to see happen. Some people call this your key takeaway, your bottom line, your headline, your argument, or in some cases, the point of view that you are advocating for. If you had to summarize your entire message down to one concise sentence that was memorable and actionable, what would you say? Here are 2 top-level examples for a presentation that you might give. We must update our logo and branding. We should increase our investments in reaching new customers. Notice that these are boiled down to one concise, action-oriented sentence. You lead your message with your level 1 statement on the top of the pyramid. One of the reasons McKinsey promotes the pyramid approach is that some speakers and writers want to do the opposite. They want to tell the whole winding story and all the details and then finally land on the bottom line recommendation at the end of the message. If that's you, I recommend that you figure out what that key message is that you're tempted to put all the way at the end as your call to action and instead reword a little bit and give it as your top level message first. To figure out what you really want to say here at level 1, ask yourself questions like this. If this is the only thing my listeners heard was this one sentence, my top level message, what would I say? What is the overall point I want to make? What's the big idea or action I want my listeners to get on board with? The second level of the pyramid consists of your subpoints. These are the necessary supporting points to build out your overall level 1 argument. Many people call these subpoints your buckets. And as your subpoints spread out, this visually starts to look a little more like a pyramid. You might give your 3 arguments or your 3 reasons to support a direction you believe is the right one. It's possible that your level 2 subpoints outline a process you want your listeners to follow, and you have your 3-part plan that lays out your ideas in practice. For example, my 3 reasons for wanting to update our logo and branding are, number 1, the current logo is too complex and it doesn't look good on printed materials. Number 2, customers find the meaning of our current logo and branding ambiguous. And 3, we're losing old customers without gaining new ones. In that example, I've been giving 3 reasons or justifications to support my overall level 1 argument. This time, let's say I wanted to focus on explaining a process that I'm recommending to reach new customers. I might say the 3 ways to invest in reaching new customers are through online ads, email outreach, and personalized follow-up. You'll notice in that example, the way I phrased my subpoints was more concise than in the previous example. You always want to strive to be clear and concise in that level 1 message and for your level 2 subpoints. Using 3 points is also fairly traditional in writing and speaking. Readers can digest that, listeners can digest that, but ultimately the substance of your message will determine exactly how many main points you use. And if you've done this before, you know that trying to figure out what's in those buckets is no easy task. You have to ask yourself, what primary questions do my listeners need to be answered? What are the top reasons we should do this? What are the key parts of the plan? Who specifically should be involved in this project? Now on to level 3. The third level is where you put all of the data that supports each of your subpoints. The supporting details will be completely unique in each of your messages. The idea is each one of your points should have support behind it, not just your opinion. You can't really just say, you really need to do this. That's usually not going to cut it. To be truly thorough and persuasive, you need to provide a logic and rationale, hard data, case studies, illustrative examples, customer feedback, and other concrete support in each bucket. I'd like to use the metaphor of a courtroom. Level 1 would be your big overall argument, like my client is innocent. Level 2 of the pyramid is where you have the specific planks of your argument that you'll lay out in court. My client has an alibi, has no motive, and wasn't physically capable of the crime. For each of those 3 planks, of course, you would need evidence, official documents, surveillance video, witnesses. In other words, a lawyer in court has to support every aspect of the case. And just like in court, the supporting details are where you'll spend the overwhelming majority of your time when you're communicating. It doesn't take long to communicate your level 1 point and state your level 2 subpoints, but it takes time to spell out all of the details in the supporting materials inside of those buckets. As a bonus now, let's talk about how to make sure your subpoints are what McKinsey calls MECE. That's MECE, which stands for mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive. And it's a mouthful. Mutually exclusive simply means that each of your subpoints in your message and the data that supports each of those subpoints do not overlap. Each bucket is mutually exclusive. So for example, in my message about finding new customers, my subpoints were that we should reach them through online ads, email outreach, and personalized follow-up. Let's say just for illustration purposes that one of my data points to support the use of more online advertisements was a specific story about a customer who found our business through online ads. Once I sort that story into the online ad bucket, I should not recycle another part of that story or bring it back to support another point like the thing about email outreach as well. In the same way, don't cite the same statistic over and over again in each bucket. That'll start to sound redundant and create unwanted blurriness between your subpoints. Instead, strive to make your subpoint buckets and the evidence inside each bucket mutually exclusive. You want to use fresh, distinct data in each of your subpoints. You can make sure that your buckets are mutually exclusive by doing what we call a vertical logic check. Make sure that each of your data points supports the point right above it, and make sure that that subpoint supports your overall top-level argument. If you find that some data, an example, or illustration doesn't directly support the point above it, then that's probably a loose thread that doesn't belong on your outline. And when you're doing a vertical logic check, if you find a piece of data that pops up in more than one bucket in level 2, then keep it with that subpoint it fits best and delete it from the other bucket. Now, are there exceptions to this rule of being mutually exclusive? Of course, but strive as your default approach to make sure each subpoint and the data within them are distinct. And the CE stands for collectively exhaustive. You would do what McKinsey calls a horizontal logic check to make sure that you have the right comprehensive spread of subpoints and that those subpoints flow in a natural logical order, first, second, third. In our example about creating a new logo and new branding, you have to make sure that the key questions that your listeners will be asking themselves are answered through your subpoints. Do your best to anticipate what your listeners want to know most. Now, I personally think the word, quote, exhaustive is a bit of an exaggeration. That sounds like a lot of pressure. That could give the wrong impression that you're supposed to tell your listeners everything that you know, which oftentimes is the cause of being long-winded. Instead, just make sure you have the right spread of subpoints and that there are no obvious questions or parts of the process that are left out. If you leave out something important, you should expect that your listeners are going to give you some pushback on that missing piece. And by doing your vertical logic check and horizontal logic check, that'll make sure your subpoints and the details within them are mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive. Let's do a quick summary. The pyramid principle consists of 3 levels, and make sure that the information in your pyramid is MECE by doing a vertical and horizontal logic check. As mentioned, this framework is just as much of a thinking and analytical tool as it is a speaking tool because it forces you to take a disciplined approach to your preparation and really clarifies your thinking in the process. Using the pyramid is a great way to create written messages or drafting presentations. In the next video, part 3, I'll show you how to take the SCR framework from part 1 in this series and combine it with the pyramid principle to create a presentation framework that McKinsey recommends. Until then, thank you, God bless, and I will see you soon.